Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today, we're going to take a look at Agentic AI again. That's no surprise, but empowering project delivery teams. So a little different focus. And I'm joined by Kristy Tupper, who's the head of product at Momba AI. She's also a co-host with me on another show. So welcome, Kristy.
Welcome, we've met, yes.
Yes, we have. Yes, we
A
have.
couple of times maybe.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing this. This is an
Yeah.
interesting topic, and I should say this is the second time we've done interviewed somebody from Mumbai because we did actually interview the founder last fall, but
Oh,
that
yeah.
was pre. I was really, really early, so it was an interesting conversation around knowledge work and agents. But I think you guys have taken some very specific directions, which I think will be really interesting.
Yeah.
So can we start with just an intro and then just tell us a little bit about Moomba now, and especially if you happen to have seen the other podcast, this you might need a slight update because I know you guys have focused in more.
Yeah. Yeah, we have. So yeah, I am a recovering business analyst slash product manager slash leader of product management. And so it was interesting in the journey with Mamba. We started out as a platform for knowledge work. And the more we got into it, the more we found ourselves really leaning into the ability to do a lot of those business analysis tasks and those product management
Mm,
tasks, right? When I was a business analyst and, I would have two or three or sometimes five projects on my desk. And every single one of them came with a stack like this of information that you have to review and analyze and synthesize and try to pull insights out of it and figure out, where are the conflicts and what's most agreed upon and what are the strongest themes. And, it would take, depending on the size of the project, it would take anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks just to
yeah.
read it all and figure out what was in it. So that was one of the first things that we decided we would tackle at Mamba, which is how
Mm,
do we help the business analysts get through all of that in a way that makes sense and actually draft their deliverables for them.
mm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good. I mean,
we pivoted
one
a little bit.
well, and that is, but I mean, honestly, it's just a specialized version of what you
Yep.
were originally thinking about. So I think that it's pretty logical, and I know I and if people who've read some of the things I've written lately too will know this that more and more we're talking about specialty agents, right? Because that specialization is where the biggest return is. And also, they seem to do a great job at narrow specialties and then working across multiple agents. So yeah, that's really interesting. So obviously a lot of excitement around agentic applications. So talk a little bit about how Moomba's using those agentic autonomous agents in the current offering.
Yeah. So I think probably my favorite one is the what we were calling the BA agent, or the agent that does all of the analysis and
Mm,
synthesis of the information available. We've
mm,
tuned that agent now to where our prompt for that I think is 16 or 17 pages.
mm,
And
mm,
it outputs just a beautiful requirements document. So
mm,
sitting and trying to catalog all of the assumptions and constraints and risks and out of
yeah,
scopes, which are, some of the hardest things for a business analyst perspective is
yeah,
what is classifying those out of scopes. Like, I know we're going to do this, but
mm,
what aren't we going to do? And what do we need to tell people we're not going to do?
yeah.
And the agent is just really, really good at figuring all of that out and giving you that
Mm.
draft document.
Nice. I mean that's obviously extremely important to product-based companies, right? So that's a
Yeah.
critical function, and you can see there's a lot of human constraints around doing that sort of analysis too. How do you put that much information in your brain at one time? And actually, I don't know about you, but I choke on it when it gets to a certain point, right?
I used index card. I use index. I still do. Like if I don't have
Mm.
AI at my disposal, I'll use index cards.
I usually just make a big old whiteboard in Canva, and then I'm like sticking things all over it. I don't know. Crazy. So when we're talking about business value out of this, though, and this is something that Asim and I talked about last fall too, when he was thinking about Momba, is this focus around business value in applications, not just in the language model or all these other things, but actually in a specialty application that you apply. So, how does what do you see as a potential for these kind of unique, high impact applications? And is that the direction that you guys have continued down?
It is, and I think for us, it's about eliminating all of that really mundane stuff, like reading all of those documents. Our research
Mm.
agent that goes through all of the documents and breaks them down, that
Mhm.
prompt is like 12 or 13 pages, right? And that's really what we base the ability to create a PRD on, right? Is how
Mm.
well is all of that information surfaced out of those documents? Okay, now take that and
Mm.
go figure out what I need to do in order to deliver this, build this, whatever it is. And I think going forward, all of these agents that are kind of really trying to create that streamlined SDLC where the humans involved are
Mm.
not doing that mundane work and writing on index cards, but they're looking at
Right.
what the agents are telling them and going, yeah, you know what? That's absolutely right. But I want you to put a little bit more of a client centric spin on that.
Right.
Or I want you to bring out the dollar value in that as you write this requirement. Please rewrite it. And it it's scary how good it is.
I,
I
yeah, it is, and I mean, as you know, I use a lot of agents as well, and it is actually really exciting to see the sort of output. And there's so much hype today around LLMs and generative AI, which is a foundational element in this whole agentic move. So I'm curious, how do you guys approach this? Does the application layer then give you that capability to mitigate some of those limitations and expand the way that you can build trust with an agent?
it does to an extent. There's always going to be limitations with open source
Mm.
LLMs, right? The
Right.
biggest one that I have hit against is availability.
Mm. Interesting.
They
Yeah.
don't have a reason to give you a performance guarantee, right?
Mm.
They don't give
Fair.
you one.
Yeah.
And so, but when you go to a client and tell them, oh, you can, here's our product, and they look through all your
Mm.
security stuff and all of your compliance stuff, one of the things they're looking for is an uptime or an SLA or
Mhm.
something like that. That I think is the biggest challenge. It,
Interesting.
we don't own our own LLM. We use the
Right.
really, really, really good ones that are already out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question too. And I know recently I was just talking to some folks at Zoho because they announced that they built their own LLM rather than using some of these others. Now they have MCP, and you can integrate with other types of tools, and then they can also use other language models. But their theory was, because they're so privacy focused in all their applications, that they wanted to provide customers a controlled LLM to do that work. It's a choice, right? You can go out and bring your own, right? They don't care, but it is interesting to hear, you know, how you can think about these LLMs, and do you really need something that's highly specialized, or is a general purpose LLM sufficient for what you're trying to do?
Right. And it's interesting you say that. I think those specialized LLMs are LLMs that are really good at prompting the data that they're
Yeah.
looking through to get what they need. And I think a lot of times if you are a really good prompter, you can probably get the same result with a
Yeah.
generic LLM.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in my own like research and use of the models, I use the publicly available models mostly. I do actually run an open source model locally, but that's some very specific use cases to protect data, right?
Mhm.
But it's an interesting trade off. But the other thing that, and if you're working behind the scenes using the API, you can build more context in, which is one of the bigger things that you can't
Right.
do as well with the
Right.
models if you're just on a pro plan or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that context has to make a big difference. Yeah.
It does. I mean, that's really our secret sauce. We have
Mm.
somebody on our team, a couple people actually at this point, who are just geniuses in how to prompt an
Mm.
LLM to get what you need.
Mm.
And every time I read through these prompts that they put together, I'm like, "H- like what? How did you figure out that you needed to include that? Like, this is the first draft. I haven't given you any feedback on what comes out of the system, and you're just like, they're just brilliant with it. I
Yeah.
and it's an art. It's,
Yeah.
definitely an art form.
It is, and one of the things that I've noticed, and I'd be interested to hear how you guys are thinking about this, but in my interaction, the one model that I use the most also has the capability to maintain context across all my chats with it. So it has that knowledge base that it's built up about who I am, what I do, what my preferences are, even down to the point where it has a place where I can enter in, I don't want you to use fundamentally because that's a ridiculous word that you use overuse, right? Or whatever. So I mean, how does that fall? How do you guys apply that then from this business analyst perspective?
A couple of ways. Number one, in the prompting. If we don't want the LLM to come back with something, we just put it in the prompt. Don't use the words, X, Y, and Z.
Makes sense.
Um, One of the other things that we do that we've got a really heavy focus on is both document rag because we have a knowledge universe. And so,
Right.
I said we take artifacts and we break them all down and then they go into our knowledge universe.
Yeah.
And so we have the ability to just look at what's there and understand that and answer from that, which gives context. And
Yeah.
then we have a knowledge graph underlying the entire platform. So when you couple the knowledge graph with the document rag, you
Mm.
pretty much have, and the prompt, you pretty much have the context you need
Hmm.
to go
That's
get.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because obviously the graph piece is interesting, and I've written about there's some new technology that lets you build graph into the RAG versus
Mm,
underneath. So
mhm.
that's an interesting opportunity. But you're right, a lot of data, a lot of information. If you can establish its connections, it makes a huge um, difference in how you can process and understand. Right.
Right. And the
Yeah.
document rag that we're using actually has a hybrid model, and we
Mm.
we don't have it in. Our relaunch is actually this week. And so we don't have it in for the relaunch, but it's in a fast follow that we want to put that
Mm.
hybrid model in. So then you not only get the benefits of the
Right.
rag, the benefits of the knowledge graph, but then you have that hybrid in the middle that also pulls it all together. I
Yeah.
don't know technically how all of that works. I know that the results that I
Yeah.
get when we do that are better than anything that's going to come out of my own
Yeah.
hands.
I mean, it's like that old, equation they used to show, like, magic happens here.
Yeah, right.
That's sorta
Exactly.
how I think
Exactly.
that's how I think of it is magic happens there. I don't need to know what that is, but
we
well, I
just we
guess
just did a backlog prioritization, and we put
mm.
a little purple dot on anything that was magic. That's how we we actually
I mean,
classified it that
some of
way.
it is, I don't know, like, yeah.
Uh-huh.
There are definitely times when I go like, "How did it know that?"
How did it?
Um, yeah. So business analyst, knowledge worker, in that context, how does this I mean, I can see some of it already, but how does this really transform their job and what does their job look like after they've implemented this type of system?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the AI is very much a navigator, a guide, the
Mm.
one who does the dirty work, right? And when that comes back to the business analyst is the one that puts that creative,
Mm.
um, the ideation work, the context around it, the strong tie to the business problem they're solving, right? No business analyst goes out and just goes and
Mm.
develops anything, or a product manager without having a problem to solve. And
Right.
that AI is never going to understand to the level that that problem exists as well as a human is. And
Mm.
so it can come back
Mm.
with all of the things in the world, but I just did it, and we are eating our own dog food. I'm sorry, we're drinking our own champagne. We're using Mamba, and it came back. I did a requirements document, and I didn't like one of the requirements. I said, please write this with a client specific focus, like an end user focus. And it came back with something beautiful, but it wouldn't do that without me looking at that, going,
Mm.
that needs to provide value to somebody.
right.
And that requirement
Mm,
needs to be written that way so that when you present this, they understand what the value is here.
yeah. So you really are thinking about this like you're
Oh, yeah.
providing a collaborative
Oh,
coworker
yeah,
that works with the human to improve overall performance as a team.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
you have to. AI, as we know it today, is not yet ready. It's not a human, and it doesn't have
Mm,
that level of understanding, especially translating something from a problem somebody's having into a requirement that's going to make it
mm,
better, into the technical part of how to best accomplish that, what it should look like on a
mm,
window, what's the user experience, what's the flow, what makes
right.
sense, where's the person's head, the cognitive transitions. Like, it, it can't think like that, but we can.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, that I
basically you
mean,
get to do all the fun stuff yourself.
yeah, that I mean, that's what I like about it is it does the stuff I don't wanna do and, lets
Exactly.
me focus on some stuff that I actually am really interested in. Well, this is a big disruption, and we know and we hear a lot of talk about workforce and how it impacts it
Mhm.
and that sort of thing. But there's another underlying theme here too, at least from what I can see of what you're how you're laying this out to me, and that is that we're really talking about a basic difference in the way we deliver those software and services, in the future, and even down to like what's the methodology underneath this? Are we still doing agile as a development paradigm?
I
Or
love that
do we
question.
go back to waterfall? Or is it something, some new hybridy thing that we haven't named correctly yet, or I haven't anyway?
Yeah, without giving too much away, it's a paradigm shift, right?
Mm,
We eventually get to the point where waterfall and agile don't apply
mm,
because you have a completely different way of working. You have a business
mm,
analyst who can use the AI to help do all the research, engage with UI and UX developers and solutions architects, business architects, technical architects, and get it all framed. And
mm,
then you can focus on how the development is going to happen. In
mm,
the background, you've got all of this AI that's supporting these things, right?
right.
So you've got more team focus on being creative together while the
Mm,
AI does all of the mundane work. Um,
yeah,
and one of our next things is going to be, okay, we can generate really nice requirements. We can generate really nice epics and user stories and acceptance criteria. Well, what comes after
mm,
that? We can probably generate code prompts, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's I saw that coming, and that's interesting. And I was actually that was my next question was, and so how does that actually change the other part of this, the development piece of it?
Right. There are things that we likely will not do. We are not going to jump into a lake that already has a bunch of sharks in it.
Mm,
But there are a lot of
mm,
gaps between, this AI product does this. This AI product does this. This one does this. You still have silos there.
right, right.
But who's filling those gaps and who's
Mm,
tying it all together and making it one seamless thing that in the end puts something in the hands of a user that solves a huge problem.
mm,
And that's the space
mm.
we're kind of starting to play in.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what do we call it? It's a agile fall or something like what?
Oh, yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about this. We're still calling it SDLC, but
Mm,
we're not naming it yet because nothing we've come up with really resonates with a completely new way of thinking about how
mm,
to meet a need of someone who's
mm,
using a piece of software or implementing a product or, you know, wherever this goes in the future. But
mm,
it's just you've got to meet that need. How do you do it?
yeah. I mean, we're in the middle of the shift, and it's a shift that's kind of been
Mhm.
what 2.5, 3 years now, and it's still rapidly shifting. So,
Yeah.
I think there are probably a lot of hybrids that we come out of this with hybrid workforces, hybrid development models or whatever. So Yeah, interesting.
Right, and, you see a lot of products popping up in all the different spaces, you've got Cursor and Windsurf, and you've
Mm,
got, like, all of the different one-offs that do all of these things,
yeah,
and I think products in the future, if they're smart, will focus on what they're really good at, and
yeah,
then focus on the ability to integrate to get the other pieces, because there's
yeah,
so much time and energy and effort
mm,
and work that goes into these prompts and making sure the output is right.
mm,
We've got an entire document around what our gold standard is.
mm,
And
yeah,
you focus on those, if you
mm,
focus on your area and then tie it together, it- you know, I don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none.
yeah.
I
Well,
want to
I
master.
mean, there's been a big push to, build in protocols like MCP to be able to use tools, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you want the capability for your agent to multiply its capabilities by reaching out and using, like I'll tell you a simple one. The other day I saw Claude now has an integration to Canva. I use both
Hmm.
of them. And I thought, let me try this. I was writing a blog post and I defined how I would want an infographic to look and gave it the data, and it connected to Canva and made the thing and gave me the finished product. And now I did adjust it some obviously,
Right.
but I mean, wow, that was amazing. And it took 2 minutes instead of a day.
Right. 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 And that's where, a lot of the business analyst and product management work is writing.
Mhm.
And you know as well as I do that when you write requirement 1 and you write by the time you get to requirement 9, you've lost your context, you've lost your parallelism, right? So all of the sentences read a little differently and then it starts to feel a little piecemeal and these start with verbs and these start with nouns and this one here we don't know what that starts with. We've never seen that before like and
Some
that's
random thought.
right, and that's the kind of stuff that you just if the AI just drafts it for you, it's
Yeah.
already taken care of all of that stupid stuff, right? It's not stupid, but
No, but there's some consistency there that
right,
is much more difficult for a human to execute versus a structured approach to it that the language model that the agent is going to bring to it. So that
right.
that makes a lot of sense actually. Well, I mean, so that's one new capability, but you guys talk about agent frameworks.
Mhm.
How do you what else are you seeing from the, capabilities perspective? Like is it more modular? Does it provide more versatility, in the design or what kind of outcomes are you seeing from this so far?
I Yes. All of that.
Yay.
You can
Okay,
pick and
let's
choose
expand on that.
you can pick and choose any piece of that. Um, and
Mm,
and you still get a ton of value, if I don't need it's funny when people think about going into this AI world, right? And they think about their target markets, who they're going to present to, they always start with, well, these guys know AI, so I've got to talk AI to them.
mm,
Back the boat up a second. Most of the population that's in business doesn't know it. And so you have to start with some of the foundational stuff. And if you only want to generate requirements and you don't use epics and user stories because you've never heard of agile in your life, you have to be able to do it well. Because then that document, flip back to the good old days where your requirements thud factor was a measure of how well your requirements were written.
right.
You've got to be able to output that PRD into a document that you're going to
Hmm.
walk into a room with copies and hand around the table.
Hmm. Yeah, so it really is equipping you much more effectively than you would have
Absolutely.
been able to. So that adds a lot of versatility to the to the prospect of what it can do from a business analyst perspective and even continuing across that, right? So that you could
Yeah.
impact each other, all the other roles in your development
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. I
Hmm,
mean, we have, I think, what do we have? Like
interesting.
7 or 8 personas just at this point that we're looking at enabling through,
Mm,
next up. Shh, don't tell anybody. But next up are things like code prompting and project intelligence.
mm,
Had a great
yeah.
conversation with Rebecca Wedeman not too long ago. You know
Mhm.
Rebecca from the
I do.
players. And one of the things she said was, as a former business analyst, I know that it was always really hard for me to weed through the status and figure out
Mm,
what was really going on with the project.
right.
If this could do that, well, oh, yeah, that's actually a really good idea.
Mm,
And so
yeah.
the project intelligence
Mm,
isn't a replication of your status dashboards. It's
yeah.
what are the opportunities? How can you reduce budget? How can you stay within budget? What are your best applications of your resources? Things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does change the way you interact with your environment, right? So the way you interact with data, the way you interact with. I was actually yesterday. I was in a board meeting and there was a demo from a company that we were looking at partnering with, and it basically is a conversational UI that could sit on top of whatever application that you're looking at. So it changes a lot the way that you think about how you would interact. I mean, even just like, I always tell the story about why I don't use Google anymore. I use Perplexity because I got tired of going in and asking for ways to find answers when I could just go ask for answers.
Fair.
Yeah.
Very fair.
Yeah, so I mean, this is an area that has I mean, it's definitely ripe for disruption, right? You're dealing with tons of data. It's extremely complex. It can be misleading. It can be conflicting. I mean, all those things, right? Because you're collecting it from customers and users. And so where does this go? I mean, how can you continue and deliver value in that whole product design, R&D, all the way through the coding process? I mean, where do you see this going?
I see it evolving to a next level SDLC where the business
Mm,
analyst has a role in the coding almost by being able to
mm,
generate those code prompts.
yeah.
The developers have influence on the requirements, which I mean they do today, but I think that
Mm,
relationship changes and becomes more problem focused for developers. I
mm,
I always struggle with a development team that is order taker focused.
right.
We don't have that at Mamba, and I'm extremely lucky. The team of folks that we have at Mamba doing our development wanna know what the problem is, and they will suggest solutions, and it it just feels like if every team could work that way to do what we're doing, it's so
Mhm.
much easier.
Yeah.
I'll get a note from one of my guys and I'll say, "Hey, it wasn't in the requirement or it wasn't in the task on the board, but I did this because I thought it was a smoother transition." Oh my god, that's genius. Yeah, you know what?
Mm,
I wouldn't have thought of that. Great.
yeah.
And this is going to enable that way of working.
Mm. I mean, I do think the future is this sort of hybrid human digital workforce, if you want to think of it that way. And we'll have employees on both sides, and we have to, learn how to manage that and all those other things that go around it. And it's interesting to see you guys narrowly focus in on a big problem area that would return a lot versus kind of trying to go horizontal.
Yeah.
And that is almost a shift from last year to this year in some ways. I see this happening more and more and more. That specialized is the way to go.
Yeah,
Mm,
again, you can be the jack of all trades, but if you don't do any of them well, there are other people out there that do.
yeah.
And this
Mm,
career path is near and dear to my heart. This entire process of somebody's got a problem
right.
and I want to help fix it. It
Mm,
goes back to my why. It goes back to why I sit down at a desk every
right.
day is I want to make something better for somebody.
Mm,
And I think every product manager, product owner, business analyst has that at heart.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, to be successful, you really. We've said this for years. You have to be really, user story focused. How are the users going to use this? What's the value back from that? And a hybrid team, a collaborative team, I mean, to me, that just seems logical. But one of the things in this that's hard, and so this is, and you guys may not be here yet, but one of the things that I've seen as a problem is how do you manage multiple agents and build something that's collaborative with multiple agents working across a process? I mean, what are you guys doing around that, and how do you think about that?
the agents have to collaborate with each other as well.
Yeah.
You have to have you put agents in there that fact check what this agent does, that make sure that what this agent
Mhm.
produced is what this agent asked for
Yep.
before you ever even serve it up.
Yeah.
Because we talk about we don't want silos in business today. In fact, that we just did that right on the podcast,
Mhm.
or on the in the hot seat that we just did. We had that conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
Silos, silos, silos.
Yep.
We don't want that in people. We shouldn't have it in our agents. The agents should be
Yeah.
able to work together seamlessly to enable the team to work together seamlessly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's there's protocols and standards finally starting to evolve in
Mhm.
this that are going to at least help with that. But it must change the function of the manager in this process a lot, or it seems like it would, right? So, I mean, how do you think about that from the management, product management, and into the dev world?
I think management of the process becomes not a thing because it becomes less of a
Mm,
process.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
think your product managers finally get to go out and interview people. And I don't know if you're familiar with IDEO. I have a huge girl crush on IDEO as a company and everything they do as far as ideation goes. And
Right.
I think the more you go out and talk to people and observe them, and we've gotten so far away from some of this. We send out surveys today because we have the ability to do it electronically, and it's so
Yeah.
easy, right? You you know this,
Yeah.
but
I do
but
that for a living.
I know, and you also sit down and interview people,
Yeah.
and we've kind of gotten away from interviews on man on the street. Go watch them. Don't say a word. Just go watch how your users work. Watch how somebody opens a pill bottle. It's like my favorite IDEO example is, the poor lady who couldn't open her pill bottles, and they were trying to design a better pill bottle, and they put one in front of her, and she picked it up and walked out to her kitchen, and they said, "Oh, ma'am, where are you going?" And she said, "Oh, I'm going out here." She fires up her meat slicer and slices the top off the pill bottle. Like,
Mm,
you would never know that she did that unless you watched her do it.
right. Right. It's actually a pretty
And
good idea.
right, it is, isn't it? But you also don't want somebody that's having trouble opening a cap to be operating a meat slicer. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's a downside. I'll
That's
give you that.
preventative care right there. Is, hey, let's just make
Right.
these better.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it seems like what you're saying, and I think this is important to bring out. But what you're saying is it actually creates this team that lets the human in this do the human functions and really focus on that building understanding into the process and less about because I mean how many times you hear from a product manager, what did you do yesterday? I spent all day, working my way through a bunch of requirements or building a bunch of
Sure.
requirements or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
is that the place where they add the most value? No,
Right.
not really.
No,
Yeah.
that's a time suck.
Yeah.
It's the same way with, developers. And I just met with my lead developer this morning, and he and I were talking, and he was showing me kind of code integrations and code tools and things like that. And it became obvious to us that AI will never do the coding. It'll give you code,
Yeah.
but man, you need to understand, like, this whole vibe coding thing is cool. However, you need to understand that code that you're producing and how it fits
Yeah.
into the rest of the code base and what each line does, because if you don't, you can't debug it. And sure as we're sitting here, you're going to have to debug your code at some point.
One would
And
think.
right, but it lets the developer then become the problem solver
Mm,
versus the guy who sits there and inputs a bunch of lines of code.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that always struck me too. That you have somebody who is capable and is very advanced in the way they can look at things, but truthfully, most of their time is spent writing those lines of code all day long. When I would really rather them have a broader conceptual role in that process.
Yeah, for sure. My
Mhm.
developers are brilliant. I
Mhm.
want them at the table with me figuring it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So, if you think about trajectory of and obviously that's accelerating too. We've seen lots of change, lots of acceleration, right? But
Yeah.
where do you think AI application innovation comes? And I know when I first sent you the questions, I was 5 years, but the truth is, we know 5 years is ridiculous. I can't tell you what's going to happen next year that well. I mean, and I'm
Right.
supposed to be a futurist, so
Right.
that's tough, right? But how do you see this going forward? I mean, how is this going to play out? And then, if I'm a business, how should I think about this? How do I prepare for this kind of future, both from a workforce perspective and just a process perspective?
Yeah, I think if I have found out nothing else since I began working for an AI company in October of 2024, the thing I have realized the
Mm,
most is in order to play the game in AI, you have to be ready to change on a dime
yeah,
because new things come out literally every
yeah,
day. And I can't predict where AI will go. If I could, I'd be a millionaire at this point because I'd have already built what I knew was coming, right?
yeah.
Um, I can't predict it, but you have to be flexible. And I
Mm,
can remember when the internet was becoming a thing. And
mm.
I remember sitting watching my TV one night and this www dot da 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 appeared at the bottom of the screen. And I'm like, oh, I hate that. I am never watching a
Not
TV
not
station
doing
again
that, huh?
that puts that on there. Right. Ask me how many URLs I have right now. So um to the people who haven't started down the path yet, y-
Mm,
y- it's not going away. It's
mm,
not going to be what you see today either, but you need to start understanding it and you need to start small and you need to figure out where your biggest pain points are in your company and maybe start working with somebody or figuring out ways to use AI to address those, even if it's just going into Claude or Gemini or Perplexity or ChatGPT and asking it for ideas. Like
yeah.
just start talking to it a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I will say one of the most impactful use cases that I've had throughout the last couple of years is just using it for brainstorm. Like, give me some
Right.
potential whatevers, right? Or here,
Right.
take a look at this business plan and tell me what I'm missing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
things like that are so valuable.
I drove my team crazy because, some of these guys are really brilliant AI guys. And the first thing I wanted to be able to do in Momba when they stood up the chat function was say hi and have it respond to me. I
Mm.
can say hi to ChatGPT. I go into Claude. I refer to Claude as a him. My husband is actually afraid that I'm going to leave him for Claude. And he doesn't quite understand my relationship with Claude. Not going anywhere. However, however, I talk to Claude every day and I start every
Good.
conversation with, "Hi, Claude." And
Mhm.
Claude always says back to me something like, "Hey, Christy, how are you doing today? How can I help you?" And I
Yeah.
feel like Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, I feel like they're sitting in the cube next to me. I've actually given Gemini a name so that when I talk to it, I can talk to it by name because
Nice.
I want to be able to talk to things or ChatGPT, sorry, not Gemini, because I call Gemini Gemini. But you can name it and you can talk to it like it's Barb in the next cube. Sorry, Barb, if you're
Yeah.
watching, sorry, but Barb was my cube mate for years and years and years, right? And I needed a Barb. Like,
Well, no, I mean, it's true, and Claude, same, right? I mean, Claude has I enabled the fact that it can remember all the things we've talked about across the volume of times that I've used, which I've used a lot, and it is nice, but it is also kind of pleasant to bring up a tool that goes, "Hi, Michael, how are you today?" I mean,
right, right,
there's
and
there's
something that's
something to be said for pleasantries. I
pleasant
don't
to
know.
interact with. And I'm
Yeah.
like, guys, I need to be able to walk in here and say hi, Mamba. Mamba's a name. Like, this is like Mamba sitting in the
Mhm.
cube next to me, right?
Yeah.
And I drove him nuts with that at first because they're like, well, nobody's ever going to say that, really, because I do.
No, no, I mean, they will, like,
They absolutely.
I mean, the more you think about this as a collaborative workforce, the more we need to have those civilities around the edges
Yeah.
of the relationship, even if it's not necessary. But I will tell you this: I read a study last week, I think, and I can't remember the source now, but I could look it up. That said that it actually does provide better outputs when you're pleasant with the tool that you're using.
Oh, are
That
you
if you say
serious?
thank you, and if please look at this, or I don't know why. Maybe something in the training data makes them see how humans act when they're acting well, which is, questionable, I guess, but and want that. I don't know, but I thought that was interesting that that it is positive in your relationship with your digital worker
Can you
that
send me
you're
that? Because I
pleasant.
need that study.
Yeah,
I
I
need a
look for
copy
it. I
of
know
it.
I got it. Yeah, I text. I know I put it in my social queue last week sometime, so I'll dig it up.
Okay,
Yeah, it is because I mean that is really that is really a different way of thinking about this. And the other thing that kind of as I've listened to how you laid this out, I think it comes through really clearly. Let's start talking about the technology and talk about what that collaborative work looks like, right? Because
okay,
the technology, it's gonna change. I mean, it's gonna change dramatically in in weeks. I mean,
right.
and so, if you're understanding the outputs and the outcomes and you're trying to drive towards those use cases, that seems like a much smarter way to approach this.
Right, and quite honestly, I think the heavy focus on, well, what's the AI doing? I Do you know what the code is behind Microsoft Word? Do you know
Yeah.
what the code is behind Google Docs? No,
Mm.
don't worry about it. Like, the code is my job. As an end
Right.
user, your job is to figure out how to use this and for value. And if you find
Mm.
something that I didn't think of as a product person, I need to know what that is
Yeah.
because I can make that even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
agree.
that makes sense. I and
Yeah,
I think that, more and more it's a familiarity thing too and a way to think of it, and a lot when I talk to companies that are implementing or looking at different solutions, they often you get that from the individuals, right? That I don't understand how to use this technology. I'm like, "Well, how do you work with your coworker?"
right.
I mean,
Right. It should be that easy, Michael. It
yeah,
really should be that easy.
yeah, it should.
And that's why I draw that visual of sitting in the cube next to you. I want you to come in and say, "Hey, Mamba," the same way you would say, "Good morning, Barb,"
Yeah,
right?
right. Right. Yeah. I mean, that is a part of it, and I think, making it humanizing it a little bit, there's some dangers too. I mean, obviously, you have to have some rails around that, but humanizing it a bit more makes that interaction more natural, and it does feel more like a colleague versus a tool, which
Right,
is the real shift.
right.
Yeah.
And that's how I hope we get to that point where it becomes your colleague, your
Yeah.
collaborator.
I mean, I'm already starting to see this in some companies that are approaching it this way, and I think, those that think of it like this and approach it like this, those are the ones that are gonna have the greatest success, and it really will be a competitive advantage for them.
Agree.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
makes sense. Well, Chrissy, that great conversation. It's all the time we have today. But before I let you go, the one thing I always like to do at the end is get a recommendation for the audience. So, could you recommend a thought leader, an author, a book that you think would be interesting, a podcast? I mean, all those things are. I'm particularly fond of podcasts, but but all those things are good. So, something that you think the audience would enjoy.
Sure. So I have two actually. One, if you're really interested in this AI topic, Lenny Dvorjitsky, Lenny's podcast, Lenny's newsletter,
Mm,
he comes at it from a product point of view, but he's always got some really good people on there. Like Tamar Yehoshua, I think was my favorite episode of his with she's with Lean now.
mm,
But and she's leading up their product organization. But they've always got good insight and good, how do you think about it? And what would you think about here? So I think from an AI perspective, Lenny's the guy.
mm,
The other one that I really love, and I tell everybody this, it's a podcast called Acquired, and it's Ben and David, and they their tagline is every company has a story, and it's
mm,
how companies started, how they became successful, all of the things they faced, why they
mm,
were successful, what did they go through, what happened if there was a downfall, right? Um, all of them are brilliant episodes. I haven't heard one yet that I have stopped listening to. And I'm
mm,
probably in the 40s or 50s of having listened to episodes for them.
mm.
So I
Interesting.
love Ben and David on Acquired.
Nice. Well, thank you. But great
Yeah,
recommendations, and really I appreciate you joining today.
it was
Very
fun.
interesting conversation. Yeah, it's fun. Always fun to have a conversation, and hopefully, I think we got a lot of good out of this for the audience as well. So,
Yeah.
thanks.
Awesome.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.